All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you all for attending today's panels with Film Prize Junior's Film Festival. My name is Shadi Darzadan. I'm a co-director of Film Prize Junior, and I'm so glad that you all are able to join us today. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. Thank you for being here, yeah! All right, well, we have some great panels planned for today. Well, we're going to start off with our panel on story and script writing, and we have some wonderful guests who will be joining us momentarily, I believe. Before we officially begin, I'm going to shout out our wonderful sponsors who have made all this festival and all of our productions possible. So I would just quickly like to thank the Prize Foundation, Louisiana Film Entertainment Association, Louisiana Entertainment, a division of the Louisiana Economic Development Fund, the Knoll Foundation, the Alta and John Franks Foundation, the Community Foundation of Northwest Louisiana, the Shreveport Regional Arts Council, the National Endowment for the Arts, Louisiana Office of Cultural Development, J. Wineland Group Benefits, Monteleone Family Foundation, Linda Goldsberry, Phillips and Kallenberg Investments, Heidi and Gregory Kallenberg, and Sandy and Jeffrey Kallenberg. Thank you to those sponsors. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. Well, we have some wonderful guests who are joining us for today's panel. So like I mentioned earlier, our first panel is going to be on story and script writing. So you want to make a film, but you need a story to make a film, don't you? Well, luckily we have some panelists who are experts on story and script writing, and we have them right here with us. So everybody give a round of applause to Melissa Goslin. And we have Thom Johnson with us. All right. So before we get started, let me just ask, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
Good. And how are you, Thom?
Today is a wonderful day.
Wonderful. Thank you both for joining us. So the first thing I would like to ask, since you're both here, so how do you start making a story? Like, what are the things you need to make a story possible for a film? What are you trying to look for when you want to start that story making process?
It's funny you ask that. It's right here in my bag. My
Wow.
jacket. It's a notebook and a pen and an idea. Usually what I do is, and Gregory will say this out loud too, I always have, excuse me, let me get a little closer. I always carry something like this with me around. And I sketch, and I'm an artist, and that's part of what I do. But I always have something to write down something. Because now we have phones, and that helps, but this is more tactile to me. And so you never know when you're going to be riding in a car, on the bus, sitting in your classroom, wherever you're at, and all of a sudden, boom, this idea comes to your head. And if you don't get it down real quick sometimes, it's in the ether and it's gone. And you might remember bits and pieces of it, but you may not remember how it really came out of your brain that first time. So this is how I start. That's what I do. Yeah.
Melissa, how do you start your story making process?
Sure. So for me, I know sometimes it's not even finding a story, it's narrowing down how many stories I want to tell. I'm a list maker, so sometimes if I sit down and just make a list of all the interesting or funny things or different things that have happened, I usually use real life as a jumping off point. So I might take something and then just ask, the question I think that every writer asks, which is what if? So take something in real life and then say, well, what if this different thing happened, or what if this character made this different choice? So I do the same thing. I write old school. I know a lot of people use their voice notes on their phones these days. Like, I'm just so old school, so I have the same thing with a notebook, and I'm always writing lists of things. But I usually take a real life thing that happened to me. I'll just kind of think, what happened interesting this week? Or I look at the news sometimes and read stories about other people, and then just kind of sit down with that what if question and try to branch off all the possibilities of how something might have been different, or what if I would have done this instead of that, and usually kind of start there.
Okay. So I know both of you have been involved in film for a good part of your careers as filmmakers. How, in the script writing stage of the process, do you know when story writing is going well, and how do you know when it's not going well?
You go
I'm going to
ahead.
take that one. Usually when someone else reads it. I mean, I know when it's going well for me, when I feel like I'm in like a flow zone, when you feel like it's coming to you naturally and you're not having to sit down and really like slug out every single word. When you feel like that idea is just, like, oh, I'm doing awesome, this is great. But really for me, it's always going through, editing more, and then when I hand it off to somebody. And the thing about, especially I think with storytelling, is the whole idea behind it is you're trying to convey something to people. You're trying to get your idea across. And so it's something I wish someone had told me early on, is to not be so precious with every single word. If the audience, if the person who's reading it says, but I don't understand it, there's a problem in my script. The problem's on my end. It's not them. It's so easy to say, well, you just don't get it. And it's like, well, if you're not getting it, I'm not doing my job.
Oh, and very quickly, I'd like to introduce our our next panelist, Jaya.
Oh, hi.
Wow. Oh, Jaya McSharma. Hello.
How's it going, guys?
Jay, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
So Jaya, I actually I just asked Melissa and Tom how to tell when your story is going well, and if there are any indicators that you can find where you know the story isn't going as well. So how do you know when a story you're writing is going well?
What were y'all's answers?
Tom has an issue. I said when someone else reads it and says,
Yeah.
that's not going well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a general unease that comes for me when I'm approaching the page, like a sense of dread. Am I going to be able to continue it? My friend, colleague, and co-writer, Josh Munn's back there, always tells me just wake up and designate 10 minutes to an hour every day to write, whether it's complete CRAP or not. I don't know if it's better to spell it.
Thank you
Is
for
it better
spelling
to spell
that,
it?
yeah.
Okay.
Spelling is important.
Okay,
for
it
this.
is. I was in the spelling bee if anybody wants to talk about that. So just the act of writing every day, just the mechanisms, the practice of doing that is very important. But yeah, I think when I'm writing and it really starts to flow and I start to get excited because the characters in the story have taken on a dimension to themselves and it's almost like they're leading me in a way, that's when I know it's going well. It's almost like you can just feel the story flowing through you and you're excited and it's not hard. Kind of like a relationship. You shouldn't have to work at it all the time. Some days should be good, right? And then if it's going poorly, then I can kind of feel that it doesn't feel natural, it doesn't feel authentic, and then I'm trying to force it too much. And then just like Melissa says, I mean, if you have somebody else read it and they're yawning or they're kind of looking at you like when you get a new haircut, like, oh, you got a new haircut? And they don't say whether it's good or not. That's the same way when someone reads your writing, because people don't want to hurt you in general, but they'll tell you authentically. So I think those two things, just how naturally the plot's unfolding to you and the feedback from someone else.
I think that makes a lot of sense because I know just from reading some of the scripts and like that's some of the times the feedback that a lot of students make. Like a filmmaker who's just starting out, they maybe have like an idea of the story in mind. They want to tell it a certain way, but when you tell something more naturally, it just feels a little more authentic and it's easier for an audience to like take it in and accept it. Whereas otherwise, it's like a foreign body that your nervous system's trying to attack with uncanny valley awareness.
Oh,
and stuff.
exactly. And I don't know if any of y'all have seen Tick, Tick, Boom on Netflix. It's really, really good. It's starring Andrew Garfield. It's about Jonathan Larson, who was the writer of Rent. And he spent 8 years writing this epic musical. He's every day after work just grinding, just trying to do every waking moment spending on this musical. And he finally puts it on, and even Stephen Sondheim, who's a huge, huge theater writer, was like, this is great. For the next one, write what you know. And so when you can write about your own experiences, which is what he did with Rent, and it became, this massive hit on Broadway for 12 years, then people can sense that authenticity, and you can feel it too when you're writing it on the page.
Great. Tom, what have your experiences been with story writing? Like, is it easy for you to tell, like, when a story is going well for you versus not well?
Sure. I mean, and I typically write kind of fantasy stuff, so it's more, weird characters and things like that. So I have a little bit more leeway with what I can get away with, besides just a complete drama narrative. if I'm up at 3, and I have a writing partner as well, actually, a couple that we get together and brainstorm, which is another thing I would have said earlier too. Brainstorming with your friends helps a lot in storytelling.
Can you lean into the mic?
There we go. Sorry, it's been a while since I've been on a mic. Brainstorming, and if we're up at 3 o'clock in the morning and we have one page done and we've just been hanging out and talking and we haven't really, that's when we know, okay, this may not be the right thing to work on.
Makes
That's
sense.
good advice.
Okay, so if you have a story and you sense it's not going well, what is the best course of action to redirect that story if it is able to be salvaged? How do you salvage it? How do you get it back on the right track?
Start over. I mean, you can only, you keep pounding your head against a wall. It's not productive and it's not creative anymore. You're fighting against your creativity in that sense, in my mind. So when you feel like you've hit this wall, and another thing, if I'm halfway through a script and I just realize these characters aren't interesting, here's the thing: if you're writing a lot, and this is just me, I've got 10 unfinished scripts,
Exactly.
That are just sitting around because I'm not going to keep spending my time on something that I know is just not going anywhere. And that's okay. That's something I have to tell a lot of artist friends and creative friends and students of mine. It's okay to fail, and it's okay to not finish this script. What's not okay is that you don't start another one.
Yeah.
Right? You don't keep going.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Tom.
That's really good. You should say it again. It's really, really important.
Here, let me if I rephrase it a little bit too. You'll get a great idea, and you'll think this is the best, most epic thing in the world. And I see this with a lot of kids, so I know this is a fact. And then they get bogged down in it, and they don't want to quit and start something new, which might flow easier because they're scared of failure, and you can't be scared of failure as a creative person because it's going to happen. You are going to hit walls, and you are going to make mistakes. And if you can't pull back and reorganize your brain to do something else, that's when we all have a creative block. Everybody's like, I got a creative block. Well, then just do something else. Now start something new.
I have one too to say too.
Go ahead.
For when something's not working, I find a lot of times, I think especially this is what I teach to students, to younger people, is to have something. I always say what the litmus test is for each one. What is it that I'm trying to say, and does this further the story? And so if something's not working, also if it's say that people don't think the joke is funny on page 6, the problem probably isn't the joke. The problem is probably the setup, in page 3 or 4. So go back, that thing that's not working, go back and say, okay, how can I set this moment up? Whether it's drama or it's that, are they getting all the information that they need? Is there a piece missing? To pay off, you always want to think about you're setting things up, and then especially with a short film, you're setting it up and then you're making it pay off. Those are the two things you're doing in the script. You're setting it up and then you're making it pay off. So how am I setting it up, and then what is that payoff? And did I work for it? Did I achieve it? You can't just come in and say, this funny moment. And I've seen a lot. I haven't seen them all, but I've seen a lot of the films so far. And it's amazing how well, I think everyone has such a good sense of story, what makes a story, something to be told. Everyone has something to say. So I think within the script, also what Tom said, are these characters interesting? Are these characters interesting, and what can I do to make them more interesting? It's always great if you go look at the movies you love. Each character kind of has their thing. They have a little tick, or they have some business. They're doing something, they're eating the whole time, or they're, messing with their hair, or just kind of doing something. So you want to take all those characters and make them stand out, give them a little something. And so when something's not working, I think those are the questions, what am I really trying to say? Have I gotten away from that? And then tighten it up. Where are those places you can tighten it up? And then just think about the setup and the payoff. So is everything set up that could be? And then how do I look at that payoff and bring it all back? So if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot
Okay.
of sense.
Yeah, and if you get a chance to see her short film from last year's film prize, she knows exactly what she's talking about because there's a huge payoff of a joke at the end of your short film called Momento. Seriously, if you don't follow her on social, you've got to see her. It's so funny. But I would add to what they said, if you're not failing, you're not trying. You're going to fail. If you're not failing, then you're not doing enough. And
Want I just add to that, like my earring game that I thought was really strong until I sat next to Jaya.
big fuzzballs.
Yeah, which I thought I brought the earring game today, but
Yours are
I
more
failed.
sanitary. I appreciate it. They're both great.
I don't even have earrings on. Oh,
Well, what are you doing?
embarrassing.
And 2 books, if you're interested, that I found were so helpful to me just in terms of encouraging my creativity from fellow creative writers. The War of Art by Stephen Presley, which is about this thick. You can read it in one sitting. And Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Those books are so amazing in helping you feel understood as a creative person and helping you understand that resistance is going to be there every day of your life. The battle is waking up, choosing to face it, and then writing anyway. Feel the fear and do it anyway, right? So I would really recommend those 2 books. The War of Art by Stephen Presley and Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. They're both great.
I definitely second The War of Art.
Oh,
It's
God, so
great.
good. And you can visit it time and time again like an old friend.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and I know so often like creators like think of themselves as they're like just silos, like they're alone. They don't have anybody else they can relate to. But it's so important. Like there are so many creatives out there.
Yes.
We're all going through the same exact problems where it's like we just get stuck or blocked and we don't know how to move forward.
Right.
And there's no harm and no shame in like reaching out for help and saying, hey, like, what do I need here? You know, what can I do to make this work? And sometimes that feedback, that connection there can just help you get that story where it needs to go.
It's very important. My husband is a musician, and I'm a writer/actress. So we're both creative. So we're both prone to feeling like we're the only ones in the world who could possibly be feeling this way. And then when we're both down, it's hard for one of us to get the other back up. So don't make the mistake of thinking you're the only one. Like, I want to be creative, but obviously I have no talent, and then you just dig yourself a hole. The best thing you can do for yourself is get a network of 3 to 4 people that you trust and invite them over for pizza and say, this is my idea, let's go through it, like what's wrong with it, and bounce ideas off of each other, because you are not alone, and you can very much trick yourself into thinking that you are.
So the next question I'd like to ask is, you now have your story in a good place. You have your characters, you have your plot, you have your setting, you know what you want your story to be, but how do you turn that story into a screenplay? And I think I'd like to ask Melissa first, because Melissa, I know you have some experience on this topic, because I remember you had a workshop session through Film Prize University. Shout out Louisiana Film Prize. Thank you. Yes. So Melissa, how would you suggest starting out that process?
Just in terms of just the creative part of it, I mean, first of all, like screenwriting is such a different format. Like, so one of the things is we've all read books. Like, you know, you grow up reading books and different types of things. Like, read some screenplays. Take things that you, movies that you know and love, television shows that you know really well and you know the characters. There are a bunch of sites on what's like Scriptorama and a whole bunch of sites online where you can look up scripts. Read some scripts. Do yourself a favor. It's a different art form. It's sort of like prose meets poetry meets, it's just its own thing. So make sure you're familiar with the format and you've seen how other people do it. I always start with an outline. I just write a lot of notes. I draw some too. I'm not an artist, but I draw just because I'm trying to think what it's going to look like visually. There are also now with the internet, you can go on and get a lot of screen captures. Look at other movies, look at other things like that you have reference material, get visual with it. It's a visual medium. I mean, you're going to be writing it on paper on your computer, but it is visual, so really think about what these characters are doing and what they look like. And then I always start with just the locations, like writing down my locations, what I want those to be. You're going to also, hopefully you're writing what you know. I've seen such great use of that. Like, so many people use the school, use someone's house, use what you have access to for your locations, and write from that. and then your characters as well. So you have the story. Look at who are the actors or actresses that I have, and what are their, how can I incorporate them into the story? How can I kind of tailor it for them? And then also for the locations. And then you just, like Jaya said, that blank page is really scary. You've just got to sit down and make it happen and just start writing. Yeah. But I think my biggest advice on that is probably the reading other screenplays, because it's just not something we do normally. And you can sit down and start writing one without ever having read them. So it's just really good, and you get that natural flow of what a good screenplay kind of feels like.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. And I know, so Thom, I know because you work a lot with like puppets and animation and all like different like visual medium as far as like film and that narrative go. So I know those kinds of like script writing processes are a little different because they aren't always like a solid like page of text and wall. Sometimes there's like storyboards and pictures that you do have to find like reference material. So how would you suggest like going into that medium?
Yeah, we use a lot of storyboards. In fact, even with the small little 5-second music videos we might do, we'll use storyboards because I am visual. I write scripts and I use them, and they're tools. That's the thing to keep it all in mind. These are tools to your filmmaking. Usually what I'll do, and I'm like Jay, I try to make sure I have time set aside. If I know I've got a project, I'm going to set time aside every day. That's going to be part of the script writing process. I'm going to take my outline. I'm going to break it down. We're going to write our script using standard format, and then I'm going to take storyboard sheets, and I'm going to start drawing, or we give it to somebody like Hillary or some of the other guys that work with us, and we draw. And sometimes, because most of us that work at the studio are visual, a lot of people we'll have 3 sets of storyboards, and we'll cut them apart and go, oh, this is the really good shot right here for this section. And it's just a process. I echo everything these ladies are saying, because that's what, if you look at it, here's the thing, especially with storyboards, and I know some kids just gravitate to it because they like to draw. This goes back to your point of getting people around you. When you're in the creative process, I have lots of friends. We're semi-working on a project right now, and we just contact each other. Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, what about this? And then when it comes down to formalize, we make sure we have somebody that's doing that specific task. Okay, you two are going to write the script, and then we'll bounce it off you. You're going to do the storyboards, and then we'll look at them and we'll adjust. And that is just, it's, again, setting your time aside. The issue is you may not know anybody who likes to draw, and you still want to make a film. Well, storyboards aren't, I think they're essential, but a lot of people don't use them, and that's totally fine because their mind works that way. Here's the thing about storyboards. They don't have to be these great works of art. That's why I still suggest everybody do them for their projects. They just need to show what angle the camera might be at, who's going to be in the shot and why, and then some camera movement. What are we gonna do with this camera? Now, a lot of that is improvised on set. Yeah. A lot of it's just, oh yeah, well that didn't really work out, but this does. You know what I mean? So. It's just tools. That's what it is. It's tools so that when you're out shooting, you're ready to go, and you may change it up. In fact, let me ask you both a question. How many times have you fully followed the script that you wrote? Never. There's always got to be room for improv through it, and that's just a whole nother part of it.
Yeah. I think too that what you said, I love the part about the storyboard and how you work. I think a lot of the script and a lot of storyboarding is just how do I get this vision that's in my head and communicate it to these people I'm going to be working with. Because film is such a collaborative medium. I came from writing, And at one point just got really sick of like 200 pages of just me, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, this is terrible. Like, I want to do something that's more collaborative that involves other people. So it's kind of that, how do I get what I'm seeing onto page, paper, whether it's visual or in words, to communicate, because someone's going to have a camera, someone's going to be acting these parts, someone might have to build production design, and I need everybody on the same page. So really, if you think about it that way as well, it's so useful of just the script is, I always call it like the blueprint. We're going to build a movie. We need to make a blueprint, and storyboard is just another amazing tool to say, this is what I'm seeing. And it doesn't have to be pretty, which is a good reminder for someone like me who is not an artist, but loves to scribble. You know, so mine might just be a circle in a box with a circle, and I have someone's name written in it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. So basically, the main idea with the screenplay is that you want to make sure that your story and your vision is clearly communicated to the people who will help you make that story come to life. Like, if you don't have to be like the professional like script formatted. That does help because it just makes things more standardized. People can understand it more easily because they know what to look for. But as long as you have like all your visual cues set up, you have your characters set up so you know like who's talking, like who, like what to expect from this scene. It just makes that process that much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I have a short and a feature that are both supposed to be done right now, but I'm still working on them. And at the beginning of each, document I have, this is what I want to accomplish. This is the conflict. This is how I want people to feel at the end. This is how I want them to feel about their characters. And so when I send them to my friends or family to bounce ideas off of them, I put those questions in there like, did I achieve this? And if not, why? Because I want to make sure at the end that what my original intention was still accomplished, because that can really get away from you. And another thing about collaborating, I would say, is if you don't feel like a little bit stupid when you're around your other collaborators, then find some other people, meaning you should not be the smartest person in the room. They should make you feel a little bit dumb because they are so good at what they do, not because they're mean to you. That's a very different thing, okay? Like when I started writing my very first short film, I had no idea how to write a script. I just typed it up as a story in Microsoft Word, and it did not look like a script. I didn't know anything about spacing or characters or scene descriptions, but I wrote my story out. I wrote the dialogue out just like I was writing a story, and then I sent it to friends who might make fun of me a little bit, but ultimately help me. So if you know what you want to say, just get it out in the way you want to say it, and then find people who have been doing it and let them collaborate with you. It's always okay to admit that you have something to learn, that you don't know how to do something, and ask for help. Do not be ashamed of that, because a lot of people in this industry will act like they're super cool and they know a bunch of stuff and maybe try to make you feel a little bit smaller because of that. Those aren't your people. Everyone has felt dumb at some point. They just may not be admitting it. So don't be afraid to say, I know what I want to do, but I need help doing it, and find your people that way. That's how I found mine. Two of them are right there.
Wow.
Just ask them, Josh and Melissa Munz. Just ask them. They'll teach you everything.
So Jay, I did want to ask you, like, do you think there's much of a difference in script writing between like different genres? I'd say so. Like maybe like if you're writing more of like a dramatic story or more of a comedic story, or maybe something that's like more non-fictional. I'm not exactly sure like how like expansive or broad your repertoire is, but like
Yeah.
I know you've done like you've worked in different fields and stuff. So do you think there's any major like differences in scripts writing at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I love to write comedy. I love to make people laugh and try to make people laugh and hope that they feel like a little bit of a heartfelt inspiration. That's the kind of stories that we like to write. With our last short film, Nana Kadum, for 2021 Film Prize, we wanted to go a little bit more in-depth and telling a more personal story, so it was more dramatic. So again, it goes back to what you're trying to accomplish, but especially in a short film, it's really difficult / easier to build tension in a short amount of time. So I found that for a drama that there really needs to be a turn, not necessarily a twist like you're trying to surprise people, but a turn where you see that the character does have an arc, even in a 5 to 15 minute story, because you want to show growth or, not experience, but like basically being able to survive whatever the conflict is in a drama. And it doesn't have to be a resolution that's necessarily happy, but you do want to show something that is different from the beginning of the story. With comedy, that may not necessarily be the intention, right? You may just be trying to show one moment in time that is ludicrous or silly to make people laugh, but you may not need that same dramatic intention and finish at the end. So I really do think it goes back to defining your characters as well and as explicitly as you can at the beginning of the process, and accomplishing what you want the intention of the film to be. Like, what is the log line? What is the purpose? What do you want people to walk out of the theater saying about your film and how the characters made them feel? So it is different for comedy and drama in my experience.
Well, that's actually a really great segue for my next question. So once you have your story in mind, how do you start with creating dialogue in your story? Like, you know your characters are, ideally you do at least, like if you're starting to at least. But how do you figure out how to get them to interact with one another? How do you create that sense that they are part of the same story and they are impacting the same storyline, the same plot, all those things? How do you get a dialogue to work in your story?
Who's it?
Tom, why don't you start?
Let's see. Sometimes what we do is we get in the room and as we're writing, we try to put ourselves in the characters and we just have a conversation. Way back in the day, before I ran off from Shreveport, before I moved back, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I used to hide one of those big old tape recorders and hit record and hide it under the
You might need to tell them what a tape recorder is.
Oh, it's some of them know. Some of you guys don't know.
I'm just kidding.
It's a big box that you put a tape in, and you hit those
cassette
buttons,
tape.
and it's mechanical. But I used
No
to
touch screen.
I used to put that under the couch before all my friends would come hang over.
This is getting creepy, Tom.
And this is a short film, guys. Just if you're listening, get out those notebooks right now and take all this down. This is your next short film.
But what would be great is after we'd hang out for an hour, or the
great
tape
ideas.
clicked and everybody went, "What was that?" I would listen to the tape, and now what I was looking for was little sections of dialogue where people interacted in a way that was so natural, and at the same time had that pacing that you want when you're writing a script, because it's part of writing a script is pacing, right? And so that's a weird little tip. I don't really suggest it, but
Please
Yeah.
do not record people without their consent. That is not what Tom is saying.
no, you get them to sign
Oh,
afterwards.
yeah.
But it did work. I mean, we got really cool little snippets of stuff to use. But again, I've kind of transitioned to this thing where we hang out in the studio and we just try to act like we're the characters and kind of go, and do silly voices. And then you'll start to get interactions, and then you'll go, oh, that was a great line. Right? Write that one down. Oh, that's a great joke. Put that in there. That doesn't work for everybody. And it works when you can collaborate. Now, what you end up having to go do later anyway is take all that you did and organize it and make it flow. But, that's just my tip. I mean, that's the other thing. You're going to have, even though there's these tools you create and these tools you use, everybody's going to have different ways to do this. And even though we're giving you guys suggestions and telling you, hey, here's a way, here's a tool, at the end of the day, you're going to have to go through this and see, that storyboarding, we did some, stick figures and it worked a little bit, but, the script's really good and we can follow it, or things like that. And doing Film Prize Junior now for a while, we've gotten treatments from students that weren't scripts. They were just the story, like you were talking about. They wrote out their story, and some of them were really great films because they used that as the tool they needed. Now, we hope that they take that and go further and start using, okay, well, that was successful. Now what if I really wrote dialogue?
Yeah.
Things
like that. So, that's my feel on it.
Say one thing about dialogue too.
Yeah.
With dialogue, I think also it's not necessarily a conversation. Like, dialogue is such its own thing that really watch something and just think about the dialogue. And I always say, like, you've got that one friend. Like, think about when your friend comes to you and they're like, Emma just said the most jacked up thing. Like, you won't believe what Emma said. And they say it, and you either say, like, it kind of sounds like Emma. Or you say, like, Emma would never say that. So you want your characters to be that clear to where it's like, this is how Emma talks. This is how Susie talks. Mike talks this way. They all have kind of their little things so that it's like, okay, and when your character, how would my character say this? Really think about the people in your life and model it after them. Like, I really have to take somebody in real life or on a show or something and have them in my head when I write their dialogue so that I can, again, with the litmus test, kind of think, okay, this is how that character talks. This is the kind of words they use. If you know a little bit about, that's where their backstory, even if you're not going to say it in the film, you're not going to say it in the story, but that character, where they went to school, what kind of activities they have. This is just how they talk. And then make sure that you go back to that and say, this doesn't sound like that character. They would use this word maybe, or they talk fast or they talk slow. So you really kind of use the dialogue as a way of building out that particular character. So it's particular to that person and not just, you notice in movie time or in TV, like, no one actually says where they're gonna, just let's meet for lunch, and they go okay, and then they magically show up. So you don't have to do all that business and dialogue of like, okay, at noon, and where are we going? We're gonna go here. It's really easy to fall into that, but really listen to dialogue and then make sure that it follows from character.
Jay, do you have anything to add?
No, I thought that was really good. They also never say bye. They just hang up their phone, which is, I find, rude in real life. But I think it's the same thing as what they both said. For me, like, if I'm working on a story, the story's always in the back of your mind, no matter what you're doing throughout most of the day. So I guess I am kind of like Thom. I eavesdrop a lot to see how people like act in the real world, and if I hear a great line, or if for a lot of mine happens like when I'm driving and listening to songs. I don't know, when I hear songs on the radio, I just see scenes playing in my head, and everyone is different, but that tends to be something that inspires me. So as soon as I can, I just grab my phone and go to the Notes app, and I write down what I think would be a good bit of dialogue between the two characters that I'm thinking about for my movie, or in any interaction. So basically, I get these snippets. It's like I get these visions, throughout my day, and I try to take down as many notes as I can so that when I'm coming back to the writing process, I actually do have a couple nuggets of inspiration I'm building from. And be explicit as you can when you're taking notes, because I have so many great ideas that I don't understand anymore, because I'm like, I'll remember what I meant by this. You will not remember. So write out the whole idea when inspiration strikes you. Don't trust your memory.
Like a note that just says skin turns green. That's not really a great note. Like, why does the skin turn green?
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
Well, as you get older, it'll be a problem. So just take good notes now.
Things to look forward to.
Yeah.
So I'll just say, let's quickly go around if there's any like last bits of advice you'd like to share with people on the topic of like starting or ending a screenplay. How do you get to that finish line? Like a quick little snippet of advice.
Why don't you start?
How do we get to the finish line?
Yeah.
Whoa. I'm still learning that myself. I think just make a commitment to writing, build out a 10 minutes to an hour each day, whatever you can, so that you never get out of the habit. Surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, and read those 2 books I said.
And I think, too, just first of all, like a huge shout out to the teachers, sponsors, parents who have seen these kids through their first film. And I just want to say, like, you're already a filmmaker. You are a filmmaker as much as I'm a filmmaker, as much as Thom and Jay are filmmakers. You have sat down, you have done it, and you're amazing. So just keep at it. Keep telling stories. What's the next story you want to tell? What did you learn from this one? And just keep going. You guys are amazing.
Yeah. I think it's something like 90% of people have an idea for a movie, 2% of them actually go out and make them.
You're
so
in
if
the
you
2%.
finished a film,
Yes.
you're a filmmaker.
So,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
Indeed, and that's the beauty of Film Prize Junior, is that you guys get this great, massive opportunity to be that filmmaker, to do that, and you don't, not to take anything away from, what we do at Film Prize. But at the end of the day, you're the ones who did it. We just gave you a format to do it. So you should definitely be patting yourself on the back and be very happy for yourselves. To get over the finish line, that's a weird one too, because I'm kind of like I said, this goes back to this whole idea of you're not going to win every one of them, and you're going to fail sometimes, and that's okay. Tenacity is the word I like to use. Just don't give up. If you get stuck or you feel like you've hit a wall, take a break, dust yourself off, and keep at it. Again, those 2% of people who finish their film have tenacity. They have this ability to just keep going, and it's tough. It's almost like an ethereal thing. It's hard to really tell somebody, do you have tenacity? You got to do it. You just have to get through it. And here's the thing: each time you accomplish one, you failed 5 times, but you succeeded that one time. Your tenacity builds, so that the next time it gets a little easier. And the next time you get more refined tools. And then the next time you get to this point where you're like, man, I can do this. I can make my life about film. Or better yet, just being a creative person and living a creative life. And that's what I got to say.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, thank you, Thom Johnson, Melissa Goslin, and Jaya McSharma for contributing your thoughts on story and script writing.
Yay!
Now, does anybody in the audience have any questions for any of our panelists today on story and script writing? Anybody? Yes?
So do you have, whenever you're writing a script, do you have ideas of how your story will end when you're still in the beginning stages of writing?
Okay,
So is
That's
that
a really good
your
question.
guidance-
That's a really good
That's
question.
a really good question. Your guidance towards how you're going to end up writing the middle of the script.
So when you start a story, do you have an idea of how it should end, and how do you find guidance to get to that point?
I find personally I do, because I like to know what I'm writing toward. So I think of it as writing toward something. That mark may move in the course of it, but I'm weird though. I read magazines backward. I read magazines from back to front. It's just I've always been like that. I don't know, but like with a magazine. But I like to know where it's going for me, and I like that moment. Like I was saying earlier about payoff, I kind of like to know where I'm going so that I can earn getting there. And so I usually visually, that last moment is usually the first thing that I'm thinking about the opening. I mean, you think beginning, middle, and end. I usually think of the beginning and the end, and then it's just kind of a matter of trying to keep people interested in between.
I couldn't have said it better than that. That's so true. And I also do have an idea of how I want it to end, but what I learned is that you cannot be so 100% chained to that idea that you're not open to a better way for it to end when you go through the process. And so someone may make a suggestion and I'm like, no, it's my movie and this is how I want it to end, but it actually is a better suggestion. So yeah, I do have an idea, but I also am trying to learn how to remain open to possibly that looking a little bit different in case the story takes us in a different direction. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like we said, no script ever is fully complete. Like every line in the script is ever really read that I've seen. But yeah, it's a map, right? Your story is a map, and here's your destination, and you're starting over here, and you know where you want to go. But sometimes, and I typically try to follow the 3-act structure, to the T, but it never works that way either. But where you start off and where you want to go while you're getting there, things might change, right? If it's a really, I don't want to sound confusing. The idea is that yes, there should be a goal, right? That goal should be what you're going for, and it should be yes, this is what the story's about. The twist at the end, or they fall in love, or whatever it is. But as she said, you can't be afraid to go, now that we're halfway here,
Right, exactly.
maybe that mountain over there is a little bit more interesting than this little molehill over here, right? So that's how I think about it. You know, and again, my stuff is a little bit weird and different, so it's hard for me to kind of go, you know. I'm always willing to go, yeah, you know what? Those crazy goblins over there might be where we end up, you know, so, yeah.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for attending this panel today. So if there are any students or teachers, let's give our panelists a round of applause.
Thank you.
For Jaya, Melissa, and Tom, thank you for being here.